In the silence of a seemingly perfect life, I stumbled upon a secret that shattered everything. Why would you leave your family like this? The question haunted me, as the truth about an affair that spanned at least 2 years came to light, leaving me and our 3 daughters adrift in a sea of betrayal. "I'm so sorry," her words, a feeble attempt at mending the chasm her actions had wrought. As I navigated the storm of abandonment, I discovered a resilience woven from the very threads of heartbreak. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. My 16-year-old wife has essentially disappeared from our lives during 3 days ago. I'm really lost in my current situation. I'm looking for any type of advice. My wife, 39, a female, and I, 40, a male, have been married for 6 years. We have 3 girls, 15, 13, and 11. We are high school sweethearts. We've been together for approximately 22 years now. I have limited information, but here is what I do know. 3 days ago, my wife arrived home from work. She had to work the next day. She appeared agitated and emotional, quickly packed an overnight bag, and fled. I just found out about this because our oldest daughter was home and observed the incident. Despite my attempts to speak to her, my wife was crying, disturbed, and mute. She remarked that she was almost panicked. Despite our attempts to contact her by text and phone, she has yet to answer. I contacted her parents, who assured us that she was safe with them and asked for patience and compassion. Aside from that, I contacted her sister, brother, and a close professional acquaintance. Her brother said he had no information, and a coworker mentioned that she arrived at work in the morning but left by lunch 3 days ago. That was all I knew. That is it. It's been 3 days now. My wife has not contacted me, not even with the children. Nothing. Nobody is telling us anything. And here I am with my 3 daughters, attempting to cope without her. The children constantly ask me what's going on. What happened to Mom? She's with Grandma and Grandpa, and we should be patient and understanding. I said, I want to quickly load the kids and head over there without warning. It's barely 3 hours away, and being stuck in limbo is terrible. The kids believe we had a big fight during our divorce, but this is far from the truth. We never fought. The children are aware of this. I'm not sure what's going on, but may someone please provide any logical clarification? In my current emotional condition, I am caught up in a tornado of ideas as I navigate life without her. If someone died, wouldn't your spouse's family be the first people you would notify? Perhaps some previous trauma has returned. However, if it were me, my wife would be the first person I'd approach for help. We currently have a gap in information. Nothing makes sense. I do not know what to do, and I'm simply sitting here in limbo with the girls. We all know nothing, and nobody is telling us anything. This situation makes me nervous, terrified, angry, etc. Almost any feeling can be felt. Can someone come up with something reasonable? Why would you leave your family like this? I get some updates, verifying that everyone was correct about the incident. I will disclose what I know and leave it at that. My father-in-law did not call me last night, so I called the police for a wellness check. As many of you suggested, this action triggered a slew of issues that I won't go into. But my wife has been having an affair for at least 2 years and most likely longer. Everyone was right. My wife apparently had a heart attack on Tuesday and later died. That night, for sure. My mother-in-law and, it appears, my sister-in-law were aware of the situation and had been covering for her. My wife has still not contacted me or the girls. I'm trying to keep this from them for the time being. I have no idea what to do from here. That is all I know, and that's the end of me. Thank you for all of your helpful advice. I don't know how to move on after this news, but that's all. Please pray for me and us. Now for the second update. Several others have recommended this to me. I just joined and have been reading through numerous topics whenever I get time. Mostly at night, when the commotion of the day is over. And then, of course, the brain takes over and I get these bouts of depression. Then I am overcome with rage and sleeping becomes practically impossible. I aimlessly move around the day in a zombie-like mindset, striving to familiarize myself with various acronyms. My personal D-Day came on Friday when I discovered that my wife, whom I had assumed was having a 2-year affair, may have been having an affair for much longer. The person she cheated with, known as the AP, was someone she had known for a long time. The revelation came to light, unfortunately, when he died of a heart attack. I'm still looking for information with the help of my oldest daughter. There are a lot of things I'm not ready to face. I had no plans to continue posting about my position. However, so many people have offered their assistance and advice with me. It has almost become therapeutic. It aches to know that so many other individuals are in this kind of pain. I sincerely apologize. I visited with 2 separate lawyers yesterday and today to examine my alternatives. I also contacted numerous places for therapy. However, there are long delays where I live as I attempt to follow many of the tips provided by others to avoid drinking. But I do not drink and never have. Self-care, exercise, etc. I consider myself to be in excellent shape for my age. However, finding the energy to exercise is difficult right now. Some of you will have questions concerning the specifics, such as who, what, when, and why. Please bear with me because I am still deciding whether to dig into those intricacies. Every day feels like a new explosion. At this point, I'm looking for guidance on just one issue so that I may find some comfort and get some sleep. My wife meant everything to me. She has been my dearest friend since high school and the mother of my 3 lovely daughters. We have inside jokes and secret handshakes, man. It is all gone. Everything. It's all gone. I reflect on all of our years together, every milestone, every chuckle, and now I'm just so depressed. It is crippling. It's as if nothing mattered to her. And now, my future will be without her. Then, of course, the show Could Use comes into play, and I am filled with an unquenchable, boiling wrath. I scream into my pillow and punch the mattress till my arms ache. It's a terrible cycle. I only sleep out of sheer fatigue. Then I'll wake up quickly and the mind games will resume. Any energy I have is dedicated to my girls, who have been attempting to care for me as if they were my parents. It is unjust to put them through this. Could you tell me about your sleep experiences after finding the affair? How did you deal with the loud solitude and emptiness of the night, alone with your thoughts? I've decided to make my daughter's sleep needs my #1 priority during this process, but I'm struggling. I'm hoping you can provide some guidance. Thank you, everyone. Third update. I apologize for still being new to Reddit. I don't know how much of my scenario I should repeat or rehash, but it's been a week since my day. And since that day, I've learned that my wife's affair lasted well over 4 years. There is still no definite timeline. Most likely it began emotionally and subsequently became bodily. I'm curious how the pandemic and lockdowns impacted this. There are 2 inquiries that I may or may not receive responses to. Anyway, yesterday my in-laws paid an unexpected visit to see their grandchildren. Wayward wife has been crashing at their house since this nightmare began, which is complete and utter nonsense, of course, given that they only spent 15 minutes welcoming the girls. My wife and I had 3 daughters before she asked to meet with me privately. It was a long chat, as you can imagine. I don't want to go into everything in this piece, but to summarize, my wife wants to come home, but she is terrified of the consequences of her actions and is afraid to confront what she has done. Her parents also probed deeply to see if I intended to divorce, and they spent a lot of time convincing me to forgive my wife and attempt to restore the marriage. They were highly guilty and embarrassed, yet it was clear that they wanted my wife to leave their home. The discussion was handled in a civil and respectful tone. I must admit that I mislead them by expressing doubt about my future plans, while my objective is to proceed with the divorce. However, I am concerned that disclosing my decision may jeopardize my prospects of extracting the truth from my wife. While I recognize that I may never fully find the truth, I am determined to have her sit before me and provide an explanation if feasible. We've been married for 17 years and have been together since high school. We have 3 children and have shared innumerable memories and experiences. I want her to look me in the eyes and say everything. I also want my children to understand that I gave her the opportunity to explain herself, apologize, and handle things as a mature person. I am constantly trying to take courses that will provide the best example for my children. I do not know. Maybe I need to do something differently. Legally, I can't keep my wife out of our house. The lawyer made it very plain. So if my wife decides to come home, I can't stop her. I definitely want to avoid this right now. My daughters and I have finally settled into a comfortable rhythm, so I created a demand that I believed would only be possible to meet for some time. I told my wife she may come home if she came down with me in person, looked me in the eyes, and confessed everything about her affair. From start to end, She answered all of my questions without hesitation or deception. Then he sat down with the girls and apologized in person while also answering their questions. Given that they have already been informed, it is only fair. Legally, she is free to return home at any time and is not required to comply with any demands. However, if she is hesitant to face us, I can use this to our advantage. I want to stress that I'm not trying to be sneaky or deceitful. I want to postpone cohabitation as I am not prepared for it at this time. Our state requires a 90-day waiting time before a divorce may be finalized. Her return is inevitable. We'll both have to return to work someday, and life will continue regardless of this disaster. I want to give myself more time to plan and improve my mental and emotional wellness. My wife has been contacting the girls, claiming she does not wish to divorce, and frequently apologizing to them. They've shown me the texts she's been asking about me on a regular basis, and the reality of what she's done to all of us has hit her hard, especially in the last few days. How do I handle this? Was my demand foolish? In any case, my wife will be returning home shortly. I'm feeling secure about my next steps right now. I'm not alarmed by this because I knew it would come eventually. I want to make the most excellent option for my girls and myself as we move forward. Thank you to everyone who has offered encouragement, guidance, and support. I had an awful weekend. However, after a week of preparation, my wife returned home yesterday. Previously, I would meet her with a hug and a kiss as soon as she entered the threshold. But this time, there was an extremely unpleasant awkwardness between us. Despite her attempts to solicit an embrace before speaking, I turned away as if nothing had happened. The scene seemed strange. After she settled in, I naturally asked her to tell me everything, but she reiterated that she was not ready. We spoke on the phone earlier this week. The same result. I emphasized that the sole condition for her returning home was that she loved her family enough to explain why she had been gone for nearly 3 weeks. But she just said she wasn't ready for it. It was difficult not to yell at her, but I took a few deep breaths and tried to remain calm. I failed, and after the first of many long pauses, I just blurted out that she'd been having an affair with this coworker for over 4 years, planned to leave me for this other man, ghosted her entire family, and now walked through the door without fulfilling the one single condition that I had asked for, and that I wanted to divorce. This is when things went weird. Her body language and facial expressions made it clear. She had no idea what I knew about her affair. She looked at me wide-eyed, then stood there in the kitchen, staring at the floor, saying nothing, just stoic. I expected anything. Everything except this, maybe a passionate outburst, maybe a teary confession. I anticipated many reactions when my wife returned, such as screaming, yelling, or blaming me for the affair. I was prepared for a severe tone, assuming we could sit down and hash things out. However, what happened was very different. We stood in the kitchen in complete quiet for what seemed like 5 minutes. It was the strangest moment I'd ever had. We both felt awkward and didn't know what to say. I had read all of your comments and recommendations regarding my circumstances, and I even took notes. I sat in front of a mirror, mentally preparing for each eventuality that could arise during this conversation, except for this one. So I resolved right then and there to document what I knew about her affair. Perhaps part of me proceeded to tell her everything I knew. Admittedly, I made assumptions regarding various things, including how she met a fair partner, her sister's involvement, what happened during COVID-19, etc. She gazed at the floor the entire time. I became angrier as I went along because she said nothing, but I tried everything I could to avoid raising my voice or becoming obscene. I was eventually able to compose myself. Then, there was another long, uneasy stillness. Then rage turned to grief as she realized everything. I then gently asked her what I had done to push her away. Has she ever loved me? Was she a fair and worthwhile partner? She said nothing. She didn't move. She simply did not respond. There were no tears, no apologies, no ranting, and no explanation. She stood there with her head down, offering nothing. The pain I felt at that time was excruciating, perhaps even worse than D-Day. I found myself staring at her, unsure whether I could move. Unfortunately, the situation worsened. Our daughters had eavesdropped on the entire encounter. I had an overwhelming sensation of foolishness, recognizing that, despite my efforts to prioritize our kids and their needs over the previous few weeks, the unforeseen consequences had now occurred. But I became emotional, and stopped thinking about where they were. When I addressed my wife, our oldest daughter stormed downstairs, releasing a lot of pent-up rage. My wife promptly ran upstairs and shut the bedroom door. That's where we are now. Last night, I heard my wife weep most of the night before falling asleep. Only our youngest tried to communicate with her. The rest of us avoided her. If I can muster the nerve, I'm going to offer her a stay with her sister until we can finalize our divorce. However, she still considers this her home. It's going to be horrible if we all have to live with her. I was mistaken about my wife, and you all were right. I was mistaken about all of our years together. I was wrong about all of the memories, life-changing moments. I was convinced she went on her knees and asked for forgiveness. I was confident she would repent of everything from the previous 4 years and reveal the truth to absolve her guilt. This woman drove back to a farmer's market once because she discovered she'd been given 10 too many and changes that weren't worth it to her. I feel like I'm not valuable to her. Maybe I never was. Now, what should I do? Today was very uncomfortable at home. Despite our efforts to continue as we had for the previous 2 weeks, it is clear that preserving the status quo is no longer possible. I wish I could skip through all of this, avoid divorce, unpleasant conversations, inevitable disagreements and battles, and drama. I'm especially thinking about people who have had to cohabitate with an erratic partner, and I'm eager to get past these difficult times. How did you handle that, especially with children? I know this is only the beginning. I keep reading blogs that claim things will get better, but I'm so far from it. I don't stop wanting to yell at any time. I'm SOB right now. I'm trying very hard to keep a stable mind for the girls, but I'm not sure if I can do it for 3 months. School will start before all of this is over. Since learning about her affair, I've been doing my best to pretend it's not happening for the sake of my girls. I attempt to speak and think the correct things. But tonight, I must admit the truth. Many of you publish every day, and it comes in waves. But I got smacked with a big one tonight and lost my cool a little. Divorce papers have been filed, but my estranged wife has yet to appoint a lawyer. I've been attempting to approach the matter with patience and sensitivity, hoping for an uncontested divorce that we can mostly handle on our own. However, after tonight, I am uncertain. Despite our weekly cohabitation, my wayward wife visits her sisters on Friday nights and returns home on Sunday nights. She works pretty near our home, but her sister is 1 hour distant. Suppose there hasn't been any traffic in the last few weeks. In that case, it's been a routine of primary avoidance, with myself and the girls attempting to carry on normally. At the same time, the wayward wife simply remains to herself. However, there have been minor exchanges every evening, except that my oldest daughter and my erratic wife aren't speaking after a few bad fights. It is for the best right now. Lately, I've been taking much of your advice, as well as what I've read. I work extremely hard on my self-discipline with my wife, and even though it takes all of my strength and determination, I've been short and indifferent to her when we've only babbled. Nonetheless, always friendly and respectful. Until tonight. She's come home from work the last couple of Fridays, gotten a few things together, and left for her sister's weekend before I've even arrived home. But not tonight. When I arrived home tonight, she was waiting in the kitchen for me. I tried to walk past, but she lightly grabbed my hand and asked if this was how I was going to treat her because she was not ready to talk to me about her affair, which, by the way, was the first time she'd mentioned anything about her cheating since it all exploded nearly a month before. I made an effort. I honestly tried to restrain myself and walk away. However, our girls were not at home at the time, and I felt an intense sensation of wrath. I eventually couldn't take it any longer and poured all of my terrible agony, hurt, ache, anger, and suffering on her. I have no idea how long I went without thinking about time. I did occasionally raise my voice, becoming agitated and loud. I just broke down and told her how devastated I am and how much suffering I go through on a daily basis. Everything I've been keeping back, everything that has been bothering me. I mean, I could make this post 4,000 words long if I tried to recap everything I said. I was determined not to quit once I began. Of course, I cried and became emotional again. I was so friggin' angry with myself afterward. I had been doing so well. Damn, she got to me. I allowed her to get to me. I knew it would happen. I knew it. It has been building for a while, and I can only vent so much in the weight room. Also, for the first time, the wayward wife broke down and became tearful. Surprisingly, she began sobbing uncontrollably. Regrettably, seeing her suffer the same pain as me made me joyful. I wish I didn't care, but it was satisfying to see her eventually break down, as if there was someone in there with a sense of compassion. Surprisingly, she apologized repeatedly during my emotional outburst. Her emotions were visible, and all she could say was, "I'm so sorry." However, I left the kitchen before she could gather herself enough to say anything further. I requested her to leave me alone, so that's how it happened. She lingered in the kitchen for a bit before leaving, once more, for her sister's residence. When the girls returned home about a half hour later, they realized something had happened. It was difficult to hide, but I wasn't ready to talk about anything, and I don't think they should know about it. The two youngest are doing considerably better, and I do not want to impede their recovery. And telling my oldest about this would only add gasoline to her anger, which I don't like. I despise this so much. I wouldn't say I like it. I should have kept it together. I should have just ignored my straying wife and walked right past her. I don't know right now. In retrospect, she was attempting to initiate a conversation about her affair but lacked the necessary skills. And apparently I didn't make it very far because I burst. I became genuinely concerned about her well-being. I understand that others may condemn me for this, but I do not want her to be harmed. She's been secluded, left alone with her thoughts, and almost everyone has turned away from her. While she deserves to face the consequences of her behavior, she is still a human being and the mother of my children. What a setback for me. I'm really disappointed in myself. Sorry for another lengthy rant. I also called my brother and ranted to him. I'll attempt to start again on Monday. I am simply human. It felt great to vent on her. But now, of course, I'm experiencing regret. Should I text my wife or leave it be? I'm such a mess. But thank you for listening, for giving me the support I need to get through this, and for all of your advice. In the midst of the commotion, we all began treatment, so that is something. But this is exceedingly difficult. It's just so hard. This is the 6th update. I know many of you have reached out to me, and I appreciate your concern. Many of you were correct. Things are not going well, and I have not had the opportunity to be online at all. Initially, I considered taking a break from the internet, but this week has thrown me off course significantly. It's been a terrible experience. My wife hasn't really given me space this week. She's been overly sweet, continuously apologizing for her affair, sobbing, and even overpowering me with physical affection. She has been banging on my door at night, wanting to talk. I've ignored her at times, but I've spoken when I felt like it. I finally snapped at her on Wednesday night, begging her to leave me alone. Then last night, it was a little over a month since my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home after her affair ended. And now, as things have settled into an unpleasant cohabitation routine, she came into my room after the girls had gone to bed and begged to speak with me alone. She approached me in a different way than she had the entire week. I thought it at first, but eventually we went to the garage and sat in my car to avoid further conflict in front of the kids. This is a lengthy apology. She told me everything like she said. We were outside for about 3 hours. I don't know how much to share. I stayed up all night listening to her sobs for several hours. Sleep escaped me, and I found myself trapped in a loop of sorrow and wrath. At times, I battled to resist the impulse to go in and vent my frustration, only to be overcome by tears again. The emotional agony persisted in waves. Please forgive me if I take a day or so to answer to anyone. I just need to get this off my chest and try to get some sleep. It hasn't helped that my wayward wife has been constantly apologizing and begging me for another chance all evening. Tonight, too. I had to leave for a few hours to get away from her. It's really hard to be around her. Anyway, her sister introduced her to her affair partner prior to COVID. They dated back about 5 years with no romantic intentions, but he was a higher-up at a company she wanted to work for and still does. He then put an end to it, so her desire to change employment wasn't motivated by her affair. But when she did move employment, she definitely had an added incentive. After she acquired the position, affair partner started flirting with her. Texting was the first step, followed by photographs and more texting. Then it turned physical. She confessed to her sister just before COVID struck, and she wanted to come clean to me at the time, but she chose to keep it a secret. Of course, wife said she lost contact with her affair partner shortly after, but when the lockdowns and limits were relaxed, he reached out to her again, and she continued to chat with him until the physical side of the affair restarted. Once businesses resumed normal operations, she claims she ended the romance several times out of guilt, but eventually returned to him. In essence, the affair was never entirely over. She submitted a great deal of information, including a 5-page package of handwritten notes documenting the timeline of her affair. She read the entire account, answering questions along the way. It was discovered that she had lied about weekend vacations with the girls. She lied about her work-related travels. She lied about traffic jams, troubles with her parents, shopping trips, and so on, just as I expected. The list was enormous. I just trusted her after so many falsehoods. Every word never questioned anything, yet they were all a ruse to be with him. Hearing that all made me feel bad. Everyone was accurate, but her adoration remained constant throughout. She never became distant, as I read so often. Intimacy did shift, but not to the point where I'd notice warning flags, she admits, as she fell in love with a fair partner and desired a life with him. He was older, divorced, and single, and he promised her expensive gifts, vacations, and anything he could lavish her with. She began thinking about fleeing her family obligations, describing the excitement of being with him as too appealing to pass up. She frankly admitted that she became tired of the daily routines of family life. Her account was unusually frank and heartfelt, and appeared to be genuine. Midway through, I lost my cool and began bawling. Hearing it all was painful, as expected. Of course, as she concluded her confession, she told me how much she loved me and always has, and how she would do anything to save the marriage. Many of you predicted this, but it all looked false to me, as if it had been staged. I've been with this woman for more than half of my life, and I can tell when she's full of crap. I may be mistaken. It doesn't matter. However, I was more composed than the previous week. Still enraged, she uttered a few hurtful things, including a barb about her affair partner seeing multiple women, and she was just one of many people he was willing to reject, which seemed to truly irritate her. When I think back to the moment she eventually confessed, a million things come to mind. All the one-liners and hurtful things I could say to her, hundreds of responses that I couldn't think of in my emotional state the other night. But there was one question I knew I'd ask. If a fair partner were still alive and she had to pick between him and me, who would she choose? She hesitated, then murmured, "That is not fair." Pressing the issue, she eventually stated that she would, of course, pick me. In answer, I pointed out that her hesitancy was the exact cause of the divorce, since it implied she was still lying. This caused her to burst into tears, and she stayed mute as we sat in the car, sobbing continuously. I was tired and informed her that we were divorcing. I highlighted our duty to the girls, asking us to communicate civilly, be good parents, and be involved in their lives. I also mentioned that despite all of the anguish she'd caused me, I hoped she was a good enough person to divorce pretty and amicably. Regain your spirit to go through the second story with more twists that will make you unable to sit still. Which individual is the most dangerous in your opinion? Someone who has spent a long time being duped, and at last, he discovers the reality. Regretfully, I had no clue that my spouse may be unfaithful to me. Was I indeed so unaware of my surroundings? When everyone is against you and hiding a horrible secret, it can be difficult to discern. Oh no, I finally have the entire house to myself. The large-screen game. I've drunk 2 cold beverages, and there are still more in the little cooler next to my lazy boy. And suddenly there's a caller. I'm hoping it's not a robocall or one of those obnoxious sales calls. If so, they're going to hear a lot. It was close to 8 o'clock at night, Wednesday night. On Wednesdays, my wife Tracy usually had to work late, so I would always arrange for a fun night out. We were supposed to stay in tonight. I had eaten a medium-sized pizza from Papa John's earlier with a few beers, and after that I had some more Coronas and settled back to watch the Cubs game. I had 6 more Coronas in the kitchen refrigerator and 2 more iced in the cooler next to me. It looked like a fantastic evening. Usually, by 10, Tracy would arrive and take a quick shower, and by 11 we would be cuddled up. Wednesdays at the Ardent Dales were quiet nights, but this call was definitely going to ruin my peace. It was just something I could feel. Still, I answered, aware of my duty, and to my surprise, it was Shell Tremaine, Tracy's boss, Jack's wife, who sounded very upset. Working with Tracy had given Jack a heart attack, my spouse, who made the 911 call. He was in critical condition when the paramedics took him to the hospital. Chell told me that Tracy had gone with Jackass in the ambulance and that she planned to stay with Shocks for as long as required, so she would need a ride home later. I wished Jack the best of luck, and told Shell I would be right over. His healing. Tracy had worked for Jack's software company for 22 years. During that time, he had been her supervisor immediately following graduation from college. She had worked her way up through the ranks to become a vital partner and confidant, frequently called his right-hand man or even his work spouse. I had already seen Tracy when she started working for Jack's company. Throughout the years, our families got to hang out. Jack was usually praised by Tracy, who considered him to be a great boss and made sure she was paid fairly. At the age of 55, Jack, a native of France, is 10 years older than Tracy and me. He keeps his body in shape by working out frequently. Because of his charisma, he often commands attention in social situations where both men and women are drawn to him. I was surprised by Jack's unexpected heart attack, even though we believe that everyone is part of a greater purpose, regardless of personal care. After parking in the visitors area next to the emergency room, I went to the hospital and asked the front desk about Jack. I told them I was the husband of the woman who had gone with him and that I was also looking for her. I was talking to a nurse when I noticed 2 EMTs approaching. One of them said something incoherently about a cook, which confused me, but I decided to concentrate on finding Tracy. Not long after, Tracy and Chell came out of the room, clearly distressed, and we hugged each other with tears in our eyes. Tracy broke the heartbreaking news that Jack was dying from a massive heart attack as she was speaking. As the three of us held firmly in the corridor, both women sobbing loudly, I stood there in astonishment, unable to speak. Chell, a fellow French national, had been wed to Jack for 3 decades. At the age of 20, Jack was married, and they moved to this nation when he was hired by an American software company at the start of the computer era. Their daughter Amy is 3 years older than my 18-year-old daughter Allison. The girls resemble each other so much that one may mistake them for siblings. Since Jack has always loved Amy, I couldn't help but believe that she would be particularly affected by this. At that moment, an EMT asked me if I was Tracy's spouse, and I confirmed that I had taken Tracy's pocketbook, which he had left in the ambulance when they got to the hospital. Moving away from the sobbing woman, I accepted it with my left hand, thanked the EMT, and shook his hand with my right. I started to tuck the purse away by looping its strap. Something strange caught my eye, a bra tucked in the center. Confused, I looked more closely, and sure enough, I saw a bra tucked inside the purse. When the women came out of the room, their cries were so chaotic. I hadn't really given Tracy's appearance any thought. Then it dawned on me that she really didn't have a bra. That seemed strange to me. How long were we with Chell at the hospital before she decided it was time to go? I wondered to myself. Amy was scheduled to arrive from university in the morning, so Chell made getting some sleep her top priority. After driving Chell home, I returned to our house with Tracy. Tomorrow, I'll help both of these women get their cars back. Tracy's from her place of employment, and she chose from the emergency room lot. Tracy said nothing to me when we got home. She immediately walked to the main bathroom and showered. After about 20 minutes, she came to sit with me in the family room. Sitting on the sofa, her eyes swollen and red from sobbing, she appeared upset about it. So I said goodbye to my lazy boy and came to embrace her. Her body was trembling with sobbing and her breathing was labored. Considering that she was meant to be working with Jack, I wanted to find out more about the braless event. However, I was unable to confront the topic that evening. Instead, I held her silently for 20 more minutes till she admitted to being tired and went to bed. As it was midnight, I made the decision to go to bed too. I took a personal day the following morning. After getting ready, I volunteered to take Tracy to her office so she could pick up her car, but she was obviously rattled, and she had trouble speaking clearly before gathering herself. Instead, she asked that I take her to Charles's apartment, and they would make arrangements for a cab to take them to the office so they could pick up some of Jack's stuff. After that, Tracy had intended to drive Chell to the hospital to take care of paperwork and get Jackie's personal belongings. She offered to help, but she turned me down. This arrangement was ideal since I needed to find the EMT who responded to the emergency the night before and get some clarification on a few things. I went straight to the hospital after leaving Tracy off at Charles and getting a quick report on Charles's status. I was led to the location of the responding EMTs and given their identities right away. At the fire station I was told to go to, I found my targets, and they knew who I was from the night before. I turned my attention to the man who had given me Tracy's purse, recognizing him by his name tag as Gage. I asked him straight where the emergency had originated. Someone was having difficulty responding to me once more. "By what do you mean?" he asked abruptly, clearly suspicious of me. "Jack and my spouse were meant to be picked up at the Sofitel. However, you didn't. Did you not? Is that the reason you called me Cook?" "Oh, no. I meant no offense," he answered, raising his voice. "We've got instances where the individuals who claimed to be in a room when they checked in weren't, and we get blamed for the mishap. Keep the messenger alive. Gage, please take it easy. Not that I'm blaming you. All I want is the truth. I had to Google up Cook, and my results weren't good. It's not your problem, though. If you lie to me about where you got them, then it's my problem." Gage answered, "We started at the West Side Hotel. The guy fell and hit your wife when they were around 15 minutes into the run. To contact 911, she had to shove him away. Meanwhile, she administered CPR. When we got to the ER, he was hardly breathing. I knew the truth. I didn't need to be told twice. Thanking them both, I left, feeling their pity looks following me out the door. My mind raced as I drove home. Jack was very close to Tracy at the time of his near-death cardiac arrest. How long has this lie been going on? Then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. The striking likeness between Allison and Amy wasn't accidental. They were kin. Tracy had been having this affair for a minimum of 19 years. How could I have missed it for so long? I chastised myself for believing Tracy and Jack so blindly because I used to work late, go out with friends on the weekends, and travel for business. Had their encounters taken place at these times, how could Shell not have known? Her ignorance seemed unlikely, even with my sporadic ignorance, especially with our girl's remarkable resemblance. Shell was a regular at Jack's office. She was pleasant enough with Tracy. How could Tracy turn on her in such a way? When I got home, Tracy's car was parked in the garage. I discovered her drinking wine in the family room. My dissatisfaction had to be noticeable. "What's bothering you, my dear?" She meant to be calm, yet she asked inane questions. I became furious. "What is the duration of your relationship with Jack?" With hate in my voice, I demanded. "Is he not Allison's father?" In a frantic leap from the sofa, Tracy broke her wine glass. "How? How could you say something so nebulous?" She let out a scream and charged straight at me. If appearances could kill, her glare would have instantly stopped me. I was not going to give up. I met their look with tenacity, standing firmly in my conviction. I spat out, my words piercing even as I reduced my voice to a near whisper. "You can ask for anything from me, but don't even try to tell me I'm mistaken by lying. I'll make sure you regret it if you do." I had never spoken to my wife so crudely or threatened her violently in our 20 years of marriage, or even previously. She reacted with utter shock. Her mouth was hanging open as though she was going to respond, but she was silenced by my earnestness. She took an automatic step back. "You may have noticed how intense my eyes were. Are you aware of what you did?" I ignored the wine stain on the carpet and kept watching her walk back to the sofa. "In addition to the physical hardship, your affair's stress probably contributed to his demise. Considering how deeply connected you were, I'm shocked it didn't happen sooner." Her face was clearly upset, indicating that I had touched on a touchy subject. She looked down at her hands and fidgeted for what seemed like minutes, but it was probably only 10 seconds. "Oh, God, do you believe that I caused him to pass away?" In a whisper, she said, "I wonder if Chell feels the same way. Why might Chell believe that? Except that she was aware of your relationship? Was she aware?" "She was mindful of us pretty immediately and gave us assistance," Tracy muttered. "She occasionally traveled with us, particularly on work occasions. She always thought it was okay that I was having fun with Jack. She was glad I took care of him at work while she took care of him at home, considering how important I was to his business success. I was the odd one out, sinking into a seat, feeling disoriented and disoriented. The only person who should have been informed is Allison. It had been 4 years since Allison met. It's all right with her. Oh no, Allison is aware of this and accepts it. God, I cried out. That's not what I meant, though. Is Chell aware that Allison is Jack's kid? She's cool with you telling her no. Amy is also aware of this. I hope everyone enjoyed their good laugh at poor old Rick's expense, even my kid. I'm assuming his daughter knew but chose not to inform me. Wonderful. I bounded from the house. Ultimately, I took a drive to a local park and spent a few hours doing nothing but sitting. Tracy made a few calls to my cell, but I didn't answer, so they went to voicemail. I merely sat and thought. Even though I thought I was smart, I felt like a total moron around Tracy. I never thought that she would be unfaithful to me, believing her without question for almost 19 years. I had absolutely no idea. I couldn't resist wondering if anyone else was present in addition to Jack. My mind started to cloud over with ideas as it grew darker. I went home after leaving the park. When I came inside from the garage, I noticed a dim light over the table in the kitchen. Tracy had a cup of tea and was sitting in her usual spot. I turned her down for a cup and reached into my liquor cupboard for something more substantial. I poured myself a whiskey and sat down in the chair across from her. There are no words to describe how deeply I regret hurting you. With her eyes focused on her hands, Tracy spoke gently. Right now, I need to hear the complete story, I answered, a hint of annoyance in my voice. You must explain how you could say you love me and then turn on me. If you ever really loved and appreciated me, you must tell me. You dare not doubt my affection for you, at all. Tracy jumped in right away. I have adored you forever, continue to do so. Simply put, I also adored it. Cherished Jack. It's a common misconception that you can only love one person at a time, but since I want to save things, I know that's not true. Proceed with it without delay. I started without feeling. When the business was just a year old, Tracy signed up for softball. The small crew put in long hours, donned numerous roles, and developed solid emotional relationships, much like many small firms do. She described it as an exciting time and frequently talked about the difficulties we had on our dates. Our connection began around a year before she joined the company. While soft, it flourished and grew. Tracy turned out to be Jack's right-hand man par excellence. If Jack were the dynamic face of the corporation, Tracy would have been the glue that held everything together. She was an excellent multitasker, and Jack has come to rely more and more on her as his go-to partner. It's interesting to note that as Tracy and I were closer outside of work, Tracy and Jack's relationship got more assertive at work as well. Tracy saw that everything in her personal and professional lives appeared to be moving simultaneously. In private, though, Tracy and Jack became even closer, even though they continued to act professionally around their colleagues, talking about anything from everyday issues to personal affairs like sex and politics. While Jack, at 34, was a well-built man with long, wavy brown hair and a gorgeous smile, he exuded an almost old-fashioned gallantry. Tracy, at 24, was excellent with an athletic build and long blonde hair. Tracy remembered that after a long day, their first personal encounter came organically on an old sofa in Jackie's office. Tracy admitted that even after I married her a year later, she never felt bad about having an intimate relationship with Jack and me. It was a deep, loving relationship rather than just sexual desire. Different but similar to what she and I had in common. But Tracy felt compelled to keep this part of her life a secret from me because I was such an opponent of adultery. She couldn't bear to end either of the connections that she so profoundly valued. Shell found out about the affair from Jack about 2 months later, but I never found out. Jack had to tell his wife, who had just given birth to their first child, the truth because he knew the affair would not end. Tracy claims that Jack told Shell that while Shell and Amy will always have the most excellent place in his heart, he wanted to save some of his love for Tracy. Then, Shell invited Tracy to come stay for the weekend with her and Jack. I remember Tracy telling me that her mother was sick and that she was going away for the weekend, and after that, she approved of the affair. When Tracy fell pregnant years later, Shell was the one to allay her fears and determine what would happen if the baby was indeed Jackie's. As Jackie's and my blood types were A+, establishing paternity was easy. Furthermore, since I didn't spend a lot of time alone with either girl, Chell or Tracy would always brush off comments about how similar the girls looked with a joke about my social life, therefore raising no red flags. Tracy mentioned that Shell considered her as if she were a younger sister and was proud of Jack's little family. I sat there in startled silence as Tracy described what had happened to her, not regretting what she had done, just reliving it. Tracy hesitated, waiting for me to say something. All I could think to ask was if, throughout our early marriage and practically daily sex, she and Jack had ever taken a break. She avoided making eye contact and seemed ashamed before finally acknowledging they hadn't. That was such an exciting time in my life, she reflected. I was continuously aroused since I had two handsome men who loved and desired me. She talked about how she kept herself clean on the days she spent intimate time with Jack, but she also admitted that she might make a mess later. She acknowledged that she tried to minimize any crossover. Still, she also admits that she had never let me have personal contact once she was with Jack. That was quite thoughtful of you, I mumbled. She thought about it. It's humorous. I never indeed compared your sex acts after all this time. You were both wonderful lovers. You were both similar in size, attentive, and compassionate. Better or worse, their sex with Jack wasn't the issue. It was simply unique, molded by the identities of each of you. I have to admit that I took some comfort in knowing that there was more to the well-endowed stranger than just passion at work in our relationship. But when I found out that she had feelings for him too, well, that hurt me much more. I was raised with the belief in monogamy, that each person should only have one exclusive partner. She was sharing her core intimacy with someone else, even if she was the one receiving it. Tracy put her down and looked straight into my eyes as though she was trying to look into my very soul. I surmised that I had nothing to say to her question, and I was putting my Duars bottle back in the cabinet when I thought of something wise to say. I slid my glass under the sink and headed upstairs to bed. I couldn't quite figure out why I was doing this because I knew I wouldn't be getting any sleep that evening. Tracy nuzzled into my back in bed with me about 5 minutes later. I pretended to sleep, not even bothering to say goodnight to anyone. I got up at my usual 5 in the morning, got ready, and left for work. Tracy did not intend to travel to the Sofitel, as evidenced by the fact that she was still asleep when I left. After Jack leaves, she and Chell will probably have to figure out how to handle the situation. But that's what worries them. I obviously had my own problems to deal with. I've always found comfort in my work during trying times, and I hope that this trend will continue. I am the vice president of sales at my own pharmaceutical company. Despite my advanced age of 45, my education in chemistry allows me to represent the new breed in this field. I have an exceptional grasp of our product's features, functions, and production methods. In contrast to many of my colleagues in sales leadership, I really contributed to the creation of one of our best-selling products, Cock Crystal, a tablet intended for ladies with overindulgent sexual cravings. We've made a lot of money out of it, and I've gained personally from its popularity. Together with Tracy, who also does a good job, my salary plus hers allowed us to live in an opulent property in a chic neighborhood. 2 fancy automobiles and beautiful holidays. After the divorce, neither of us will experience financial hardship. I acknowledged it there. The word that is feared. Until then, I hadn't given it much thought. Maybe because I felt that since Tracy's affair with Allison was revealed when she was attending college and living independently, there wasn't really a good reason for us to stay together. Not to mention that Tracy crushed my heart, although this isn't really a huge deal. I've worked with my boss, Arnold Kramer, for 18 years. I had worked as a scientist for a different pharmaceutical business for 5 years when I met Arnie at an industry meeting. We had a long talk, covering a wide range of subjects. He recommended that I look into sales, and then extended an offer for me to work for his company. I took the step because I was drawn to the challenge. My abilities turned out to be just as Arnie had predicted, and we have both benefited much from it. We have an excellent working connection, but I've also come to know him as a really nice guy, and we've developed what I hope will be a lasting friendship. After around 30 years of marriage, Arnie and Lauren are now wed. He has 5 grandchildren total, that's right, 2 grown children. He is 52 years old, but he seems much younger. He is pretty intelligent and doesn't hesitate to enlist the help of other bright people. I like to think of myself as one of them. When I told Arnie about Tracy's infidelity and my decision to file for divorce, he seemed really concerned. He asked me whether I was sure about her cheating, and I answered in the affirmative without going into details. He understood that I needed time to consider and make plans. He did, however, provide me with the lawyer's contact details for Mahoney's case. Arnie was confident in the Mahoney team, particularly in their divorce division, which catered to those with higher incomes, and he appreciates loyalty to those who work well for him. He told me to take as much time as I needed, but the issue appeared simple, so I told him that occasional absences would be enough. Because we were in a no-fault state, we could divide the earnings from the sale of the property, had separate pension plans, and tried to act in Allison's best interests. Whoa! Did I completely miss that one? Tracy had dinner ready when I got home from work that night. I'd uncorked a lovely bottle of Molo and had my favorite pasta supreme. I couldn't bring myself to remind her that Jackie was the wine expert because everything appeared so promising. My favorite drinks were distilled. It takes work to maintain order when managing several relationships. During dinner, Tracy continued her typical upbeat banter, acting as though nothing had changed between us. It took me 10 minutes or so to finally break through the facade and say those 4 feared words. "We must speak." "No, we don't," she almost immediately snapped back. Her response surprised me, as did her tone. She had admitted to having an affair with her boss for decades, which I had found out about. She was aware of my extreme disapproval of cheating. She couldn't possibly think I would forgive her. I had hoped that before I filed a lawsuit, we could have an adult conversation about this. I spoke as quietly as I could. She answered, "You can do whatever you want, but I'm not divorcing you." Her voice was beginning to sound irritated. "You and I both love me. That much is true. I also won't let you leave. I'll battle you all the way through. You're putting the best thing you've ever had at danger by acting foolishly just because it hurts your pride." I started to respond, but before I could say anything more, she cut me off. "Prior to you finding out about Jack and me, have I ever given you any cause to question my feelings for you? Have I ever treated you unfairly? I made sure you were comfortable in every way and gave you all the love you asked for, psychologically, emotionally, and physically. We are each other's greatest confidants, don't we? You would have lived happily ever after in love with me if you hadn't happened upon it by accident. You wouldn't have known the difference. Why can't we go back to that?" "No, since I did come to know. You don't really love me as much as you say you do. If that weren't the case, you wouldn't have given yourself emotionally and physically to another man. You kept it a secret from me because you knew it was terrible. 20 years of lying is not what I call love. The fact that you've been seeing another man for 20 years is bad enough. However, you also admitted to loving him. As you have with me, you have shared intimacy with him. In what way does that prove you love me? Let's ignore the physical component for a bit. Is it not evident to you that all the affection you showered on him was taken from me? I loved you both more than I could have ever imagined." I got a yell back from Tracy. He was aware of that. "But you wouldn't. I knew it. I thus never told you. You're now confirming my assertion." He was aware. I couldn't comprehend, since I couldn't have tolerated you having a second partner and acting as a sort of husband. That is completely absurd. I wasn't stupid enough to allow you to do that on purpose. Thus, you took the decision for yourself and yourself alone. It was all about your wishes in this. And are you able to fulfill them? And trust me, if I hadn't found it, I would have been the biggest idiot and happily ignorant my entire life. It might have been inscribed on my fucking gravestone. Rick Avondale is buried here, the happiest fool in the world. Because he was unaware that his wife had 2 husbands, he believed life was ideal. 3 days later, on Monday, there was a visitation and funeral. However, I wasn't there either. Instead, I continued as usual, making my way to work in the morning. When I got home, Tracy and Allison were still dressed for a funeral, and I discovered them in the kitchen. I went to give my daughter a hug, but she turned away and started to cry gently, even though she had come home from college for the occasion. Tracy softly signaled for restraint by placing her hand on my arm as she sensed my stress. Usually, I would have backed aside and respected the circumstances. However, these were different from your typical situations. My frustration seeped out of me, loud enough to be heard as a growl. After gathering a few necessities, I quickly packed my luggage and headed out. Almost immediately after my departure, Tracy began to barrage my phone with calls, which I ignored. To her credit, Allison wasn't subtle about the circumstances. She appeared intent on making me suffer after making her decision to make me the antagonist in this drama. It was brutally obvious to me then that she no longer thought of me as her father, emotionally or physiologically. It was a devastating insight. I took some private time the next day to go to the bank and close our joint credit card accounts and open new ones in my name only. I also managed to get an appointment for Thursday with the attorney that Arnie had recommended. I had been awake for 3 days straight when I went to see the lawyer on Thursday. The irony was that his name, Mike Squelch, did little to bolster one's trust in his legal abilities. I was tired, but I didn't think there was much to talk about. I told him all that had happened and that I wanted to get out of the marriage as soon as possible, taking back my part. I also insisted on our daughter receiving child support from Jackie's estate. Her biological father ought to foot the bill if I was no longer thought to be her caregiver. I told Mike that I would no longer put up with being used. Mike seemed on board with my intentions, but he cautioned that Tracy's opposition to the divorce might result in long-term court fights and required counseling. I told him to keep on as promised, unfazed. Tracy's place of employment, the Sofitel, served her with divorce papers the following Monday. Based on the timing, she got them at 10:07 a.m. Our receptionist alerted me to an angry call from Tracy on line 3 about a minute later. I had instructed the mail staff to forward Tracy's calls to my voicemail. I purposefully ignored her calls and messages on my phone throughout the week, a command they dutifully obeyed. But I came to the conclusion that it was not possible to stay away from her forever. I therefore gave Marlene, our head receptionist, instructions to connect her calls to me straight away. You annoying bastard. The moment she lost her temper, I immediately cut the call. The second call came through 15 seconds later. Please don't hang up on me. I hung up the phone again, wondering how long it would take her to realize that if she wanted to talk to me, she had to be polite. It took a little longer for the third call to materialize. She sounded quiet when I spoke, clearly finding it difficult to remain composed. This round is yours. She said, we need to have a conversation. Fantastic. I answered in a phony, happy manner. Please make an appointment with us by contacting my lawyer, Mike Squelch, at X. Having your own attorney present could also be advantageous. Things might go more quickly. 2 weeks later, the appointment was set to happen. Up until then, I lived in a nearby motel, stopping by my old place once in a while to trim the grass, get the mail, and gather some of my stuff. Tracy tried to hug me in the driveway and act like I was her long-lost husband when she saw me come to the house for the first time. I shoved her aside and went inside. She said, "You didn't have to blow us off in the driveway like that. Why not just get a divorce from me since I'm such a jerk?" I answered sourly. It was a Friday afternoon, and the meeting with the lawyers started at 3. As a gentleman, I let Tracy argue her case first, saying that although she loves me unconditionally, she still has feelings for Jack. Now that Dad was dead, she contended, everything should center around me. "Would you be willing to end 20 years of marriage for this?" she inquired. "Do you really think so little of our love?" "No. I have to end this marriage because our love meant so much to me," I shot back. "You entirely stole my heart and tricked me into giving it to you." How is it that I do not perceive this as a betrayal of trust, the cornerstone of any marriage? You were aware of the errors in your ways. In order to obtain what you want, both physically and emotionally, you thereby broke my confidence. But he was aware of it and reconciled, and they tricked me. I don't believe that I'm to blame for this divorce. It has to do with your betrayal and selfishness. Sharing your affection with another guy is a much greater sin than sharing you physically, which is something I could never have tolerated. It stings more than if you were just involved in a cheap romance. You had his child, you slept with him, and you loved him. It isn't right just because I was ignorant. Both of you took advantage of me. That's lucky for you. That day, a heart attack claimed his life, because I would have shot him if he hadn't. Tracy gasped as she heard my last words. My cheeks were already filled with tears. You understand that you haven't once expressed regret for betraying me during this entire ordeal. I continued. Rick, you may have apologized for getting caught and for hurting me, but you don't feel bad about what you did. We can still save our relationship. Please, let's postpone getting a divorce, she begged. Tracy, our partnership, our marriage was at issue. That was a better place for your party. And what about me? It was meant to be the two of us for eternity, Mike said, glancing at Tracy's attorney. This is where we end up. The paperwork must be signed by your client and sent back to us. The middle-aged African-American woman representing Tracy, with a severe expression on her face, gave a grave nod and held out her hand to shake Mike's. After a few weeks, we worked out a few minor things, and 3 months later, our divorce was officially finalized. 2 days after the divorce was finalized, I gave Mike instructions to file a lawsuit against Jackson's estate, effectively demanding child support and college fees. Even though Mike put it in a more formal way, if Allison hadn't made it clear at the burial that she didn't want to be associated with me anymore, I might not have continued with this path. This is the respect I get after 8 years of raising that child as my own? But Allison has 4 years to think about it. Tracy told her, and from her point of view, I was just an idiot. I didn't take offense because that was 14 years of wasted, genuine parental care. When Mike suggested using actual money to make up for the lost respect, just $1 million. I liked Mike's strategy. When Chell was finally served, I thought she might call, but Tracy answered. Tracy must have given me a more significant head start on the news, but Chell was wrong. Is this just another means of getting even with me? Do you have money problems? When I responded, Tracy asked a question. Okay, Mrs. Avondale, greetings to you as well. How kind of you to give me a call. It wasn't lost on me why she had called. You do understand that this gives the impression that you are relatively insensitive, don't you? She said. Do you know that I raised someone else's child for 18 years while you two, Shell and Jack, laughed heartily at my expense? And that kid now believes me to be nothing more than a moron. Your opinions mean absolutely nothing to me. I didn't say goodbye as I hung up. I guess Tracy had to have told Chell about my position and my stubbornness when I thought I was correct. In the end, she wrote me a check for the $1 million, even though she had tried to negotiate through her lawyer first. As it happened, Chell was able to afford that $1 million when she sold Sofitel to a Japanese business for $8 million a few months later, without Jack in the equation. That might have been the conclusion of the tale because it was probably a wise business move. However, as the late news anchor Paul Harvey once stated, and now for the remainder of the tale, which takes place 2 days after Sofitel was sold. A sum of $2 million was moved into a Cayman Islands account that I owned. This much was the finder's fee I received for Nakatomi Letty, obtaining Soft L successfully in 9 months as per an arrangement that I and an unnamed Nakatomi lawyer agreed upon. The agreement stated that I would be entitled to the finder's fee provided Nakatomi finalized the purchase by a specific date, regardless of my actual involvement or how the acquisition happened. But after that day passed, the agreement was void. You might be wondering now what my part in the Softail deal is. It's a little complicated, but basically, earlier in this story, I wasn't completely honest. Much of what I've described is based on fact. Still, some parts were contrived to make me look entirely unaware, even though I gave a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Allow me to explain. I had just learned what was going on approximately a month before Jack passed away. Then, out of the blue, I was contacted by a Nakatomi lawyer who wanted my help in brokering a Sofitel deal with Jack. You think I can help, but why? I inquired, really curious, aside from the fact that my wife is close to Jack because we know you're brilliant. We think you can take on the challenge and get the rewards of outwitting the man who has been lying to you for years. To say I was stunned would be an understatement, the lawyer answered. This Japanese guy was aware that Tracy was cheating on him. It was astounding. It emerged that Nakatomi had done an exhaustive investigation on multiple businesses, going above and beyond. They needed help finding out information about Shell, Jack Tracy, and even their daughters. They were right to expect that I would want to help them, but I had to move quickly. I had 9 months to take action, and they were looking at other software companies. At first, they showed me evidence of Tracy's adultery. They gave me everything, pictures, videos, phone logs, travel receipts, etc. I had everything I needed to turn the tables on both of them. They then extended an offer to me. They dangled $2 million, even though they were comfortably paid, to help them seize control of the business. From Jack. I was already leaning toward helping without the money, but I refrained from saying so. We live in a no-fault state, so my top goal was to plan my course of action and make sure I would receive the money after the divorce without having to divide it. But I had to gather myself together so I wouldn't show my hand too soon. My first thought was violent, even though it was momentary, waiting for the next meeting, breaking in, and acting rashly. However, the idea of living out my days as Bubba's roommate could have been better with me, so I decided to keep my cool, maintaining my act of ignorance which I'd been doing for 20 years. I told Arnie what I had learned about Tracy and Jack without revealing my source's identity. We drank Don Julio tequila late into the night at the facility while we discussed potential solutions. Sincerely speaking, Arnie said, "Isn't it ironic that the guy who invented Cock Crazy Tall has his wife cheating on him?" After finishing about half the bottle. "Rick, you ought to have given her some of that stuff." That's when I finally understood. Even if I kept my insight to myself, I shouldn't have shared it with her in the current situation. I thought to myself in silence. I told him a little bit of that information. Remain still, to resolve an issue in a single step. Compared to most main medicines, Cock Crazy Tall has less contraindications, which is one of its notable advantages. Actually, there is just one as long as the instructions are followed precisely. Men ought not to take it at all. It works wonders to curb a woman's desire, but strangely, it raises men's blood pressure and increases the risk of a deadly heart attack. All I had to do was find a way to get it into Jack's hands. Jax and I play golf together on the same course, and we sometimes form a foursome with 2 other guys. The next Saturday, I set up a foursome game for us, with a pre-arranged visit to the restaurant for a leisurely lunch following the first 9 holes. After a successful first 9 holes, we took a relaxed 90-minute break for lunch and drinks before starting the second 9. Now keep in mind that I'm a natural salesperson. As we were eating and drinking informally, I said to Jack, "Are you doing okay, buddy? You seem a little fatty, Jed." Jack, who is 10 years older than the rest of you, was obviously aware of the age difference when I asked him the question. When I proposed that we reschedule our tea time by 30 minutes to give him more time to relax, I could see him thinking, "No, I'm a little tired, but don't worry, I won't be changing my plans." "I'll be all right," he answered. In all honesty, I didn't believe he looked fatigued at all, but I still chose to play. His fears stemmed from being the group's senior member. Glancing inside my pocket, I pulled out a little bag of unmarked white tablets and remarked, "I have just the thing for you." I find that keeping something to myself helps me decompress and gets me through the day without incident. I handed Jack the tiny bag with the 5 tablets inside. "Over the following several days, take one of these. If you like them, I can get you more the next time we go golfing." I made Jack an offer. I drank 1 pill out of the bag and then paired it with some bourbon on the rocks. He gave a little cry that was reminiscent of Tarzan and thumped his chest like a monkey. "Guys, let's get going," he said. "I feel energized," with a smile. In actuality, he most likely did experience the effects of the medication quickly. Because elevated blood pressure might provide an energy boost, athletes concentrate on building up to their games. But for those asking why I gave him a tiny bag rather than a pill, bottle, or box, the answer is yes. Too much of a good thing. When he completed the pills, the plan was for him to throw the bag away instead of holding on to it. If someone went through his pockets during Wednesday night's scheduled events, they could find it. For those who are following along, the 5 tablets were supposed to last until Wednesday, which was Tracy and Jack's usual meeting day. Combine medicine known to boost and spike blood pressure with a man's pre-existing raised blood pressure following a passionate meeting with a lady other than his wife. And now, you have the ideal formula for a potentially catastrophic heart attack. However, given our small city's crime investigation unit's limited resources and the fact that it would seem like a typical heart attack, any additional investigation would only take place if something seemed suspect. I made sure then to embrace my role as the betrayed spouse and act just like I had a month earlier when I initially found out about the affair. I have to admit that my acting abilities even took me by surprise. 2 days after the money showed up in my account and was quickly moved somewhere else, I gave Arnie and his wife a lavish dinner in the pretense of showing my appreciation for Arnie's excellent leadership and faithfulness. In my darkest moments, he had no idea that it was genuinely an expression of gratitude for his unintentional part in my plot to exact revenge. Jack was no longer involved in the lives of the 2 women. Tracy and Shell's relationship visibly soured, especially after Jill had had time to consider Jack's death in real life and Tracy's hug. I had heard that Tracy's inability to persuade me to rescind the litigation against the estate over unpaid child support was of particular annoyance to Shell. Irrespective of the fact that Tracy wouldn't have profited from that money because of our divorce, Shell fired Tracy not long after she handled my support payments. The affair between Jack and Tracy was also well known among the Nakatomi community. It essentially ended Tracy's career as a business administrator. It seems that having your boss die in bed with you is not good for your career. I've been told anyway. Tracy came out of the scenario with a net worth of almost $1 million, so don't cry too much for her. Thus, she won't have any financial hardships for a while. She will also be able to provide for her daughter. Regarding whom, Allison made it very clear that she did not want to work with me anymore, rejecting me not once but several times after Jack died. That's what happens after all the years I've raised her, taken care of her, coached her soccer teams, and gone to all of her recitals. I promise not to make that error again. I'm doing rather well for someone who lost their life partner 20 years ago. It took a while, but ultimately I started dating once more. But I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust a woman to the same extent as I did with Tracy, and I don't think I'll ever find someone who can replace what I thought I had with her. However, I have a net worth of about $5 million and am not bound by any responsibilities. I've since moved into semi-retirement and am mainly working on personal projects. One day, I'll create a medication that lets naive spouses identify a cheating wife right away. That would undoubtedly benefit humanity.